Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, where I get a chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. This broadcast is sponsored by Reveal Brainspace, the industry's leading AI eDiscovery platform. Don't forget to subscribe to watch me, George Socha, weekly with leaders in eDiscovery. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. I am George Socha. I head up brand awareness at Reveal. On each episode of eDiscovery Leaders Live, I get the chance to chat with luminaries in eDiscovery and related areas. Past episodes are available on the Reveal website. Go to revealdata.com, select resources, then select eDiscovery Leaders Live. Our guest this week is Mikki Tomlinson. Mikki is the manager of the Discovery program at Jacobs. Mikki, welcome.
Hi, George. Thank you for having me today.
I'm glad to have you here. I would like to start with what got you to eDiscovery, and then what took you to Jacobs, and then finally at this lead-in part. So what got you to eDiscovery, what took you to Jacobs, and what you do now?
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually been in the legal field for more than 30 years, which is a little bit hard to believe. I don't feel my age, I guess. But I got my comeuppance in law firms. And I was working as a legal assistant, and but I was a sort of go-to person, right, for the remember the word perfect days. I was a master macro writer, and I was that person that everybody came to for help with tools and applications, and which led me to becoming a software trainer in a law firm. And that role actually was under Beth Kellerman, who is now at Apple. I think plenty of people know her. And she was heading up the practice support. And when she left to go out consulting, I took her role. And that's when I really got into litigation support. So really back in the days of scanning, OCR, that type of information, and in the 90s. And since then, I went out and launched a consulting company with a wonderful business partner. We sort of did it all. We did the support, we did backend, we did the word perfect to word, all of that fun stuff. So it's pretty well rounded. And took my first in-house role in 2006. So in the early days of when people really started to talk about eDiscovery. But what was interesting was what got me to that point was my clients had quickly changed from law firms to corporate law departments. And since 2006, I have been focused 95% on corporate discovery programs, whether that be in-house, whether that be consulting, whether that be I've been on the software side and the service provider side. But I love being in-house. I'm actually new to Jacobs. I started on June 1.
Congratulations.
Yes, fairly new to Jacobs. Absolutely love it. In-house is where I belong.
So what's it really like to be in-house? Not what conferences, but what it's really like.
I think that's such a good question, because I think it's a well-kept secret that doesn't need to be a secret. But most people imagine, right, that you're dealing with all of these cases day in, day out. I certainly deal with cases on a regular basis. However, there is so much more to actually the legal hold, the relationships you need, the various processes. One thing that a lot of people hear me say, and I say this often, is that while there are similarities across organizations in terms of discovery needs, legal hold support, discovery response, every organization has its own unique values, politics, the way that the enterprise is set up, how you work with IT, how you work with your business partners, et cetera. Those are all very unique to every organization. And there is so much more than collecting and processing data. Really, I mean, you get into, depending on your business. So Jacobs is a construction and engineering company. We build rocket ships and bridges and things of that nature. So we're very project-based. We have a lot of interesting and high volume data, if you will. But so much more is really developing the relationships, for example, with the business and IT owners of all of those applications that we use. And there's always a lot of relationship development that is needed internally. And that's so key, especially with our IT partners. Anything, and I think that that's such a key thing to understand. But your day changes at any given moment. Really, it may be that you're holding the hand of an executive that we've got some new pull, right, or issue that has come up, or you're strategizing with counsel on how to handle the eDiscovery, or you are developing training material that will go in with your enterprise learning for records management. I mean, it's just everything. You can go from a moment of being strategic to a moment of being creative. There's a lot of collaboration. There's a lot of focus work. Then you may be in the number crunching period. Maybe what do you measure and why, and then how, right? And what are you going to get out of that? So it's so much more than just handling a matter and the data related to that matter.
It sounds as if a critical part of the in-house role is the people skills. You need the legal skills, you need the technical skills, but it sounds like you have to have the people skills.
You do, and I think we all know this, but it's worth stating out loud again, is that the core of that is empathy.
How does that compare then for those people whose experience has primarily been in law firms? How does that compare, law firm versus corporate?
It's so different. Law firms, your relationship is with your clients, right? And whoever at the clients that you're working with, but you're dealing with the matters. You're at the matter level in law firms. And when you request something, for example, like we want to understand a data source better, that's what a law firm would do. And then they request that. And the next thing they know, they're in a meeting, right, with whoever they need to be in a meeting with. But what's happening behind the scenes is making sure that we understand that we're bringing the right people to the table. We're dealing with busy schedules. Everybody, I think has year over year been asked to do more with less, both in legal and corporate legal, as well as IT, right? So there may be a huge maze that I have had to navigate before we get to that call where we've got our outside counsel connected with the right people internally. It may be, oh, well, this person used to do that, and then it fell to more of a group, and then that group is disbanded, and we've been through some changes and whatever. So I may have gone through a complete maze, and outside counsel probably has no idea, right? They don't have any insight necessarily into that. But when I think too about sort of some of the differences, outside counsel, the law firm's role is to tell us, for example, to issue a legal hold, and may have some input on that. But what we're doing in-house and in the background is setting those parameters for how are we preserving data? Do we have the right relationships? Are we using the right tools to do so? What is our workflow? It may constantly need to be tweaked, right? As we grow and as new technologies come into the marketplace. And I don't mean technologies for eDiscovery necessarily, I mean enterprise technologies. And, so we're dealing with that at that level. That is a bigger job, I think, than anybody realizes. If you haven't walked in those shoes, it's difficult to realize. I mean, honestly, I probably spend 30% of my time on actual matters, and the rest is affecting legal hold management and, again, ensuring that those relationships are developed appropriately. And sometimes that's the hardest part. I mean, we can't all get along with every person. We may not like all of the people that we work with, but we have to have good working relationships as professional adults to really pull this off.
So many questions, so little time. Let's see how far we get. Developing those relationships, you just said, is so critical. What are some pointers for accomplishing that successfully?
Bribery, a good bottle of wine, bourbon, whatever, No, really, it's acknowledging. I think a lot of it is acknowledging that some of the people that you have to work with regularly in-house may have a whole other job that they do in addition to supporting eDiscovery. The challenge with eDiscovery is it's time sensitive. And hey, I'm sorry, I need to pull you away from your job to do this time sensitive thing. And it's probably going to take, the next 4 days of nothing but focus on this, right? So it's acknowledging that, having the understanding of that, being respectful is key. It's a lot of, I think there needs to be some humility too. Like, I don't know what you do. I'm not here to tell you how to do your job. I'm here to tell you these are the parameters that we have to deal with and that we're working in, and the importance, right, of compliance, and making sure that whoever you're partnering with internally knows that you respect them and what they're doing, and being grateful for the support.
There's a couple of stages. For someone who has never been in-house, but who is making that move or contemplating making that move, what's going to help them succeed? What's going to bring them down?
I think a couple of things. In terms of success, listen. You have to be a good listener and really observe what's happening, because there may be moving parts, right, that not everybody is aware of, and you have to really zoom out and get a bird's eye view of all of the different moving parts. But I think there's significant value in relationships with peers in other organizations. And of course, you have to be careful. You obviously can't disclose privileged things or confidential things. So the discussions can be a little bit interesting. But I think having peers in other organizations, and find a mentor. And even if they don't know they're your mentor, find somebody who what they're saying makes sense to you, and latch on, listen to what they're saying. Some of my earlier mentors probably don't know that they were my mentors. And people I still admire and talk to today. And I'm always happy to share my experiences and advice with anybody who is thinking about making that switch or who is early in the corporate space.
For someone who's not necessarily even early in the corporate space, who's made that switch before, but is, as you did 5 months ago, coming into a new role in a new organization.
Mm-hmm.
Same questions. How can they set themselves up for success, and what pitfalls should they be avoiding?
Honestly, it's the same advice, but in terms of really being a good listener and coming from a position of empathy. The biggest challenge, I would say, when you're going into a new organization with experience, corporate experience under your belt, is not to come in assuming that you know it all. Like, oh, this process worked right here. Here's what we're going to do. Boom, boom, boom. And you're shoving it down somebody's throat. And that absolutely doesn't work. Again, kind of going back to what I said earlier, that every business has its own uniqueness. And values play into a lot of that, but also enterprise structure, frankly. And this is something probably you've heard from me before. I've said it so often, very publicly, that just because something is a best practice doesn't mean it's a best practice for you. And based on whatever the unique issues are within that organization, whether it be technology issues or even politics, right? So I would also say that I think one of the most difficult, or one of the more challenging aspects, is if it's a business you have not been in before. So now here I am in a construction and engineering company. There are certainly some similarities. My history in-house has been with oil and gas and utilities. And so there are some commonalities that cross those businesses, but I'm still learning our business. It will be probably a good 2 years before I really understand it. And so advice I would give is to be patient about that and make it a point, right? Spend 5 minutes a day on the intranet, looking at what the company's announcing. And, even if it's not related to litigation that you're handling today, it's an important aspect of it, but that is challenging.
For people who are in law firms and who need, in order to get their work done, to work effectively with people in roles like yours, what should they be doing?
Well, first of all, they should be including the Mickeys of the organization. And sometimes that comes right through your in-house counsel. They generally should know to be bringing you in. They don't always do that. Especially those, it's interesting because it's not just litigation, right? It may be this sort of potential dispute that's been festering for a while, and therefore in-house counsel's been dealing with it for maybe years before you might need to, whether litigation is triggered, or you might need to look at some data and have it collected in a more formalized way. So I would tell outside counsel to ask those questions, right? Do you have somebody responsible for eDiscovery in your organization that we should be involving in this matter?
And then what else?
Well, and then I think, especially relying on the experience and expertise of that in-house person, including them in your discovery strategy discussions. Because sometimes what you get in-house is just an order, a marching order, go do this, right? And for anybody who's been going and doing that for years, you get to go, well, do they understand what they're asking, right? And I'll start questioning, is this really what you need? What is your strategy? If I understand your strategy, for how you're going to handle discovery in the case, I am in a much better position to support that more efficiently and effectively.
What are some of the things that folks in law firms do that become quite counterproductive for you?
Stray from the plan. Straying from the plan. Pardon me. That happens a lot in review, is one thing I see. It's like, and sometimes what you find, it requires replanning, right? But sometimes it's a failure of keeping the in-house eDiscovery people in the loop. So they may be keeping the attorneys in the loop and assuming that that information is being conveyed and communicated as it should be. And it doesn't always happen that way. We are all moving so fast. Our calendars are all full, and people may think it's very well orchestrated in-house, and it's not necessarily. It could be, but I don't think outside counsel should assume that.
There are many different ways of allocating eDiscovery responsibilities between in-house people, law firm personnel, and service providers to the extent they are involved. And I don't think there's clearly not one right answer for everyone. Mm-hmm. What do you think about different ways of striking useful balances there?
Well, generally, I am a fan of the corporation having the relationship with the service provider. And there's a lot of value that comes with that when there's a true partnership. So in terms of the way you set up that trifecta, I personally like that. I don't object to the law firm bringing their resources if that's more appropriate for the case. I also think that it's important that outside counsel be a part of that decision of agreeing. I don't like shoving things down people's throats. Sometimes you have to. And sometimes it takes a little convincing. We want you to use our partner, and here's why. If we're going to use yours, we need to be direct billed, and we need to be the ones that have the final say, right, of anything, right? I hearken back to the days of summation and concordance, right? And counsel wants to print out 50,000 documents. That's a hard no, but I'm not going to know that unless the service provider tells me. So there's just a very small smidgen of the value in the way that relationship works. But I also like for any of our law firms that have an eDiscovery department, I like for those people to be involved. And that's always, it can be a little bit of a hard sell internally if I'm actually asking them to bring on another biller. But by bringing on that other biller from the law firm, we are in all likelihood creating significant together between my group and their group, right? Bringing significant efficiencies to the process and the technology experience and whatnot. So at the end of the day, even though it's an additional biller, we're actually saving money, and cost is always an issue.
I think that the discussion as between legal department and law firm over what to do with respect to service providers can be challenging, but it's often an easier one than what to do about eDiscovery platform. I've heard any number of corporate people say, you need to use the law firms, you need to use our platform, and the law firms saying, you need to let us use our platform.
Yes.
How do you navigate those waters?
It's a challenge every time. Every time, George. I mean, that comes up a lot. It's very difficult to, if a law firm has a preference on a platform, right? It's very difficult to ask them to change. And I think if you're going to do that, from the corporate perspective, and I've been in that position and I'm still in that position on a fairly regular basis, you have to allow for some training, you have to allow for some inefficiency at first. And you have to absolutely go out of your way to ensure that you or your software provider, or both, are providing the best support possible in order to make, because the law firm's already going to be a little unhappy if they don't get their way and what they want to use. But you if you're going to require that, then you need to enable it and you need to support it. And sometimes that takes extra effort, but it's extra effort that's well spent to come to a successful outcome at the end of the day.
I think I know the answer, but I'll ask the question anyway, or the range of answers. Why do you care which eDiscovery platform a law firm uses?
Sometimes it's cost. Oftentimes it's cost. If you've actually brought a tool in-house too, you have an investment in that you need to realize. And like I have to prove my existence every day, right? And wherever we have failures, and a law firm complaining about that kind of stuff might be a failure, but also if I've gone through and I made a big pitch internally, hey, this is what we need to use and why, it doesn't matter if it doesn't get used. At the end of the day, it's a failure.
That would perhaps suggest it's just not worth the trouble of settling on a platform for a corporation to have its outside counsel use?
Well, I think that not every platform is right for every case. And so for me, I like to have multiple tools in the toolbox. And it's good to sort of settle on, in general, right? This is what we do, unless this case calls for something unique or different. Maybe it's the biggest case you've ever had, right? And you maybe don't want to do the project management yourself, right? And if it's a tool that is truly like for corporate, there are many on the market that are sort of intended that way to be direct sold to corporations as opposed to working through a service provider or whatever, then you're your own project managers. And that's a challenge because typically corporate law departments are not staffed the way that they, I don't want to use the word should, how about could be, to create consistently successful outcomes. I've lost sight of the question. I'm not sure if I.
No, that's okay. Yeah, you stayed right on track. We just have a moment or so left here. There's something we were talking about just before we actually got on the call, which was the level of maturity in the market. Well, what do you see? What would you expect? Where would you like this to go?
You know, maturity of corporate discovery programs, what I see, and let's just call it let's just talk about in the realm of the Fortune 500. It's across the board from immature to, wow, they really got this down. So let's take out the Fortune 20. They probably really have it down. For the rest of the world, the other 480, it's across the board. It's sometimes shocking when there is a lack of maturity, because you would expect these people have big litigation and regulatory profiles. They have a lot of employees, therefore labor and employment is in play. And, you know, there's a lot that happens and goes on. But what I would say to people is I wouldn't get overly concerned about maturity. I get overly concerned if you don't care what your level of maturity is. If leadership doesn't understand the importance of a discovery program, if you're starting from a place of immaturity, as long as you're working towards getting better on a regular basis, I won't worry about it. You know, just keep working at it and you'll get there. But I would also say we're in a really interesting time right now with technology, with generative AI is absolutely a game changer. And so I think when I look at a program that might be in the less mature part of the scale, I go, wow, you're in a great spot because you're not already committed to big technologies. And this really, I think, plays out a little bit more into legal operations right now, as opposed to eDiscovery. But, you know, you don't have a significant investment in technology and knowledge to support that technology, and, you know, having to migrate to new things every couple of years and whatever. If you're actually immature right now, especially in legal ops, you're in a great spot. You're in a great spot because there's all sorts of new technologies that are not necessarily have been bolted on for years and years and years, and therefore are now Frankensteins. So I think it's an exciting new world, and definitely looking forward to seeing how that all plays out and really being a part of it.
Well, that sounds like converting a silver lining into what a platinum one, something like that.
You know, I'm always the Pollyanna.
Well, Mikki, thank you so much for joining us this week. Mikki is the manager of the Discovery program at Jacobs. I am George Socha. This has been eDiscovery Leaders Live, hosted by ACEDS and sponsored by Reveal. Mikki, thank you so much.
Thank you, George. Have a great day.
You too.